Hello and welcome to Kathy's Corner. My name is Kathy Holt. I am a partner and trainer with Stewardship Resources, LLC. I am also an authorized teaching consultant for PowerChurch Plus accounting software. We are quickly coming to the end of the year. Hard to believe, right? That being said, there are year-end forms that businesses, including churches, are required to prepare and submit. Today, I will be talking about Form 1099 and Form 1096. In this video, I will not only explain what the forms are, but we'll also walk through preparing both forms in PowerChurch Plus accounting software. First, let's talk about what are Forms 1099 and 1096. Businesses, including churches, are required to send Form 1099 to vendors that the church has paid for a service, who the IRS recognizes as an independent contractor, and the vendor has been paid $600 or more for the year 2025. Now that threshold is going to change to $2,000 in 2026. And from that point, the threshold is going to be updated annually for inflation 2027 going forward. Now, Form 1096 is the transmittal for the 1099 forms. Let's talk about the due date. The due date is January 31st for both 1099 and 1096 forms. Copy A of the Form 1099 form and Form 1096 go to the IRS, and the vendor copies of Form 1099 go to the vendors. Let's talk about some filing rules. If the total of W-2 plus 1099 forms total 10 or more forms, then you're required to file 1099 and 1096 forms electronically. Otherwise, you have the option of using pre-printed paper forms, or you can still file them electronically. Now let's talk about who is a qualified independent contractor. They are a service provider who has a recognized business. They were hired to provide a service for the church, and the church is just one of the service providers or the vendor's customers. Otherwise, the IRS generally recognizes the service provider as an employee of the church who should receive a W-2, not a 1099. Are there different types of Form 1099? And the answer is yes. There are several different 1099 forms. Now, the two I will be going over today are the most common forms that churches may need to prepare, either a 1099 NEC for non-employee compensation or a 1099 miscellaneous for rental vendors. Now, here's a picture of Form 1099 NEC and an example of the vendors who would receive this form include, but are not limited to, guest speakers, guest musicians, lawn caretakers, snow removal services, church maintenance providers, custodial services, accountants, consultants, attorneys. Here is a picture of a Form 1099 miscellaneous. Examples of vendors who would receive this form include, but are not related to, rental vendors such as for bouncy houses, equipment, perhaps tents. Now, are there any exceptions to the requirement to provide the 1099 forms? You do not need to send 1099 forms to corporations except attorneys. They still get a 1099. Vendors that were paid with a credit card, you don't need to send them a 1099. Now, an important note here is vendors that were paid with a debit card or an ACH from a bank account, they are not exceptions. They would still get a 1099. So now let's talk about the homework you need to do before preparing the 1099 forms. These steps will need to be done whether you are submitting the 1099 forms yourself or outsourcing the work. So step one is make sure you have a signed W-9 form from every 1099 vendor. Now, technically, this should be done. You should have this before paying the vendor. If you do not have the signed W-9 or the equivalent, then technically you're required to withhold backup withholding from the payment. I'm not going to get into the details of that during this video, but just make sure you have the signed W-9 or the equivalent. The W-9 form is going to have the information you need in preparing the 1099 form. It's also going to have the information you need to know whether or not they are a 1099 vendor that should be getting a 1099 form. So it has their name, their address. Notice it has the type of business. They're going to say if they're a corporation, which means they wouldn't get a 1099 unless they're an attorney. An LLC does not mean that the business is automatically incorporated because they could be a partnership and partnerships would still get a 1099. It has their tax ID number, whether it be a federal ID number or a social security number. So it has all that needed information on it. Step two is, do you need to have pre-printed forms? So depending on your situation, you may need to purchase the pre-printed forms. And you can get these at most office supply stores. You will not need the paper forms if you will be filing electronically or outsourcing the work. Okay, let's go into PowerChurch and I'll show you how to keep going with your homework steps. So there's two reports in here that you're going to compare before you ever print the 1099 form. So let me show you where those are at. So you go into the accounts payable module, then you go to the reports accounts payable module. And the first report we're going to look at is the vendor activity summary. And then you want to make sure that you, generally you're going to say the defined range. You're going to go for January 1st of 2025 to December 1st of 2025. And you are going to want the amounts from $600 or more, because that's the threshold. Okay, now normally you're going to have a whole lot more payments on here, but this is just my example for this period of time. But normally this is going to be several pages long. So I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller here. Push this over here. And then so we can put these reports side by side. Normally you would just print them out and be looking at them that way, and then you want the 1099 vendor list. And the same thing, you would go to the defined range and you want January 1st of 25 through 12/31 of 25. And again, you want $600 or more. So you reduce that. We'll blow it up a little bit. Then we'll get them side by side. So you want to make sure that the vendors on the vendor activity summary and the 1099 vendors list match the ones that have been identified as 1099 vendors who should get a 1099. If it's not showing up on the 1099 vendor listing, that means that your vendor setup hasn't shown that it's a 1099 vendor. Perhaps all of their payments haven't been checked as 1099 payments. But your check and balance here is to make sure these match. If not, there's something you need to fix in the vendor setup. So once you've gone through this check and balance process, they match up. The 1099 vendor listing does match all of the 1099 vendors on the vendor activity summary, and the amounts are correct. Now you're ready to go in and either print or e-file the 1099s through PowerChurch. So let's go through that process. You're going to go to Accounting and Accounts Payable and 1099 miscellaneous NEC forms. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure that you've got your church name, address is all correct, your contact person, email address for that contact person, the phone number, faxes are pretty much out of date, so you don't have to worry about that. Make sure your federal ID number is there. The only time you would need the state ID is if you withheld state taxes from a vendor, which is very rare. So you probably don't even need the state ones. Make sure your dates down here is January of 25 through December of 25. Now notice down here it says only 2024 forms and e-filing are supported. Now that's because PowerChurch does not update the form until like the first week in January, and that's taken care of through a maintenance release. So if you want to do this the last week in December, you can't because the forms aren't available. So if you're using the desktop version, you will have to do a maintenance release, and again, it won't be ready by PowerChurch until usually the first week in January before it's even available. If you're using the online version, PowerChurch automatically does it for you. But again, it's not going to be there. You're not going to see 2025 down here until about the first week or so in January. So I'm going to say next. Okay, now notice here it says Form 1099 miscellaneous. So what you're going to do is you're going to go through and you're going to review all of your 1099 miscellaneous forms. So make sure that you have the vendor's tax ID in there. You make sure you have their address in there. It's just always a good idea to make sure the amount is correct. If you've got another 1099 miscellaneous vendor you want to look at, you're going to click next up here at the top left. So I'm going to click next, but we only had one, so it's telling me up here, top right hand corner, that last record. So now we're ready to move forward to the 1099 NECs. You do that by going down here at the bottom and clicking next. Notice that says 1099 NEC now. And again, to review them, you're going to use this next button here at the top left. So again, just make sure that you have the vendor's tax ID number, their name and their address all correct. And then the top left, you say next to go to the next one. And when you get all through those, you're going to have that little message. I don't know if you're seeing it pop up the right end of the screen at last record. Okay, so now you're ready to look at the 1096 forms. So you're going to do down here at the bottom, you're going to say next. Notice it says Form 1096. Now, right up here at the top, it says 1099 miscellaneous. So this is going to be the Form 1096 for your 1099 miscellaneous. Then you're going to click over here when you want to review the 1099 for your NEC. And then when you're done reviewing that, then at the bottom, you're going to say next. And now if you are going to print the paper forms, now's when you want to put in an extra form for each one of these, and then you can print a line form. It'll print, and then you print it, it'll print X's so you can make sure that it's aligned correctly. And you can have the opportunity to align it if you're not going to, and then you can print the sets for those. If you're not going to print the paper forms, then you can just print on file electronically. Now notice it's grayed out. Again, that's like I explained earlier, that e-filing is only supported for 2024. So you can't e-file until it's updated. Okay, so once you can click on the file electronically, you can either log in, or you will have the opportunity to create an account to open your account for e-filing. Now, I do not have an e-filing account, so I can't show you the e-filing process. However, I can tell you that once you are in the e-filing account, I can tell you the steps you will be going through. So the first thing you're going to do is review the forms in progress, which is going to be going through and looking at the 1099 forms over where you e-file to make sure everything looks fine. Then you're going to have the opportunity to choose the e-filing bundle that you desire. And then you're going to see your cart list. Then you're going to pay for the e-filing with a credit card. And then the 1099s will be e-filed. So you know that's happened as soon as you see the congratulation page. Now from the congratulation page, you can print the congratulation page, you can print the forms, you can print the receipt. Now when you print the forms, you can also save them as a PDF, and I strongly suggest you do so. Whether you choose to process the 1099 forms on your own or outsource the work, the 1099 forms are an important year-end process that should be done by the due date of January 31st. Now is a good time to make sure that you have the signed W-9 forms for all your 1099 vendors. And again, the best practice is to have the signed W-9 before payment is issued to the 1099 vendor. A copy of the screens I shared with you today are in the resource section below. It has been a pleasure to share this information with you. As always, if you have any questions or need help, please feel free to contact me at the phone number or email shown below. Please like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, God bless you and have a fantastic day.